Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Eat. We are moving and grooving through National Nutrition Month. It is now about 2/3 of the way done, and we've covered quite a few topics in nutrition, both on the podcast and across social media. So, this is your gentle reminder to go follow me on Instagram and TikTok if you don't already. The links to follow me are in the show notes. So, go take a peek there. Today I'm coming to you in the middle of my day. I have a lot going on, a lot to do. This past weekend was St. Patrick's Day weekend, and for those of you who don't know, I bartend part-time. I have been a bartender for now almost 12 years, and I've been in the service industry since I was 14, so I'll let you do the math on that one. But I've been bartending for many years. And this weekend especially was a busy one, as it typically is. And I found myself there more than I normally am. And it was a weekend. Last night, I got a sleep score of 97. I think it was 97. After this weekend, it was exhausting. I'm certainly not as young as I once was when it comes to bartending and moving around and running around and all of that. So last night's night of sleep was well needed, and I'm excited to get back to my own work. It typically kind of throws me off a little bit, especially when I pick up a shift, to then regroup and shift my attention back to my work. This weekend was kind of a whirlwind, and I was in the restaurant earlier than I normally am. I was there later than I normally am. So this whole weekend kind of put things at a standstill otherwise when it comes to work, which I guess in some capacity I should give myself some time on the weekends to disconnect. But losing a day then yesterday for St. Patrick's Day, and then now getting into my own work week, there's just a lot. So we're here now, and I'm recording this episode with my electrolytes. I have Symbiotica Super Greens with me. This is actually something I've been incorporating more regularly recently. I was taking greens from a brand that I actually partnered with for many years, and things kind of went south with that particular brand. So I've kind of sidestepped a little. I still have a lot of greens from them, so I will still incorporate them from time to time because I have them. But I've been using Symbiotica Super Greens, and as I do most Symbiotica products, I love them. It's super easy to incorporate, and it just gives me a punch of greens in my day, which is something I try to prioritize as it is. I think we should be getting our nutrition from real whole foods. You cannot out-supplement a poor diet, but this is just an extra added boost, especially when I'm on the go. So you can take a look at the link in my show notes if you want to try out Symbiotica for a discount. My favorite part about this particular supplement, which I'm looking at it now, it contains broccoli seed powder extract, which is something that I try to incorporate regularly for the sake of detox. I like to buy broccoli sprouts from the farmer's market. I'll get them at ShopRite if they have them. I have another capsule that I take that contains broccoli. I don't know if it's like sulforaphane or if it's broccoli. I forget exactly what it is. It's either the nutrient itself or it's broccoli powder of some kind. I don't remember exactly. I'll have to look at the bottle. But this contains broccoli seed powder extract. And as you know, I'm very big on supporting the liver in detox because of my genetics and just as a general practice. So I really like that this contains that. So check them out. I love most Symbiotica products. You know I share about them all the time on social media, but this one especially has been fun to add in. I also have a matcha with me, which it's 11:40, which is pretty late for me to have a matcha, but still working through this matcha. And then, like I said, my electrolytes. And I also have chicken nuggets and sweet potato fries in the oven. So I'm going to have to take a second to step away and grab those out of the oven. But that's the situation here. Welcome to Let's Eat. I'm your host, Emily, certified holistic health coach, functional nutrition expert and self-proclaimed wellness enthusiast, here to meet you at the intersection of physical and mental health, the space within which we become well. This podcast is meant to explore all areas of mind and body wellness, designed to offer you the integrative knowledge, behavioral strategies, and mindset shifts necessary to uplevel your health and feel better today. We'll explore nutrition, sleep, movement, self-care and stress management, habits and routines, self-development, gut health, mental health, and more. I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome to the table. Let's eat. So today's episode, we are continuing on our National Nutrition Month journey, and we're going to be talking about the perfect diet for you. Now, if you know me at all, you know that there is no such thing. There is no perfect diet out there. There is no perfect diet that works for me and then also works for you. And we're going to break down some of this. This is largely inspired by a conversation I even just recently had with a client. I actually have this conversation with clients very, very frequently. And I feel as though there is a misconception in the world of health and wellness that there is one diet that is everything. I actually was also just having this conversation yesterday with the owner of the Pilates studio. I was cleaning up after class, and she and I usually chit chat as I'm doing my things. And I forget how we got on this topic, but we were talking about diets, and she, I guess, had someone ask her, her thoughts on a particular type of diet. And she and I were just kind of, going back and forth about how people are so determined to find the diet trend, the magic way that is going to cure everything, that is going to help you lose the weight, that is going to do it all. And unfortunately, I have to meet those desires and those ambitions with a little bit of a disappointment because that does not exist. And so in today's episode, I want to just walk through this conversation and kind of give you some insight on it, because I think for me, I can speak from personal experience where I did get caught up in a lot of these trends, or, the food that's gonna make or break everything, or the superfood that I should be incorporating lots and lots of, which actually, a side note, I did a presentation. I forget when this was. This probably was in my undergrad. So my undergraduate degree is in psychology, and I don't know why I was doing this, or maybe it wasn't. I think it maybe was. It was in one of my classes that was more geared towards therapy. I don't remember. Maybe it was psychopathology or something. I don't remember. But I did a presentation or a paper on, it's called mega vitamin therapy, I believe. And it's this idea that we can overdose our system with certain nutrients to produce a certain outcome or to produce a certain result. And if we're overdoing it on one particular vitamin, and even further, one particular food, that can be harmful, that can be toxic, that can cause harm. So that was just a sidestep that I was just thinking about, how we get fixated on these superfoods, or we get fixated on, one particular supplement. And I use the example a lot where, broccoli is wonderful. I love broccoli. I think that's one of the best things that we can be consuming regularly. But if you were to have broccoli at every meal, think about all the deficiency that would ensue. Number one, you are right off the bat not getting any protein. And we want to welcome lots of color on our plate, as we know. And so while broccoli is what one might constitute a superfood, too much of that is not going to serve us, and it can actually be really damaging. So what I want to explore today is a multitude of different ideas that fall under this category of finding a perfect diet. And so, full disclaimer, I have no notes here. I have no agenda. We are just diving into it, so bear with me as I move through this episode with some tangents. But I am looking forward to sharing on this because I feel like through the podcast, I can really open-endedly share on some of these topics, whereas on social media, I'm doing more short-form content around less me being chatty and more the facts, I guess, around protein, around fiber, around, whatever the case is. And here I can really focus on the topics that are maybe a little bit more long-winded and are warranting more of an explanation and going into more detail around, and honestly just offer you some insight and food for thought. So this can be something that you take away and think about, okay, how does this resonate? How is this relevant to the way I approach my diet, how I approach my nutrition? Maybe I'm caught up in the diet culture mentality around it, and maybe this is something I should work on, because what we know is these are the areas that are typically uncharted, but can be one of the most and among the most influential on a journey. When our mindset or the way we approach our nutrition is I don't want to say dysfunctional, because it's not dysfunctional, but if it's malfunctioning or it's just not aligned with sustainability, I guess is the best way of putting it. If the way we perceive nutrition, or we are expecting there to be some sort of one size fits all or perfect diet, or we expect ourselves to be perfect, we are not going to see this long lasting change or see this long lasting success. And this is largely a conversation that I have with clients when they expect too much from themselves or they expect perfection, and I have to gently remind them there is no such thing. I do not hold myself to perfection. Yeah, I am certainly a perfectionist and I want to do the best that I can, but if I expected myself to be perfect 100% of the time, I would be largely disappointed time and time again. And especially as it relates to nutrition, this can be a big area of sabotage when we expect perfection, we don't achieve it, and then we say, why bother? So to start off, I want to talk about this concept of the perfect diet. And I think we, across social media and within diet culture, we think that there is one that exists. I can't tell you how many times people have asked me, what do you think about the carnivore diet? What do you think about the pescatarian diet? What do you think about the Mediterranean diet? What do you think about being vegan? What do you think about intermittent fasting? Actually, someone just asked me that yesterday. And I think we're missing the plot. Is that what the kids say nowadays? We're losing the plot. We're missing the plot. Is that how it goes? I don't know if that's how it goes. We as human beings, and this is how I see it, this is how I interpret it. We as human beings like structure. We want to know, especially when it comes to our diets, this is what I'm allowed to eat and this is what I can't eat. We want those parameters. People don't like confusion. And I say people, I mean all humans. We don't want confusion. Here I am bringing my psychology degree into the works. We don't want confusion. We don't want ambiguity. We don't want this open-endedness. I know I used that word before, but I think that's the best way of putting it. We don't want to know, well, you can have some of this sometimes, but don't have too much of it. But be sure you have this. But there's no real guardrails, I guess, around it. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, I think we want to know we cannot have this, and we want to know we should have this. We don't want to know that we can have a little bit of that, because then a little bit of that becomes more of that. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? It's kind of like, I had a customer of mine say to me the other day, I'm cutting out bread. I'm cutting out bread. I'm cutting it out. And while I'm behind the bar, of course, that conjures up lots of emotion inside of me. I just said, why don't you just try to crowd it out? Why don't you just try to focus on other foods, protein, fiber, and so forth, and see how your bread consumption then kind of organically falls away. But I don't think that that is the most attractive option for us as human beings. I think our instinct is to say, well, I'm just going to cut this out. I'm just going to cut it out entirely. Cold turkey, all or nothing. And I think we all know, anytime we've tried that before, and I'm speaking from experience, I don't want to come across as though I know it all, that I'm invincible and immune to all of these temptations and whatnot. No, absolutely not. We know cutting it out and just abruptly staying away from it, not only does that typically not sustain, because that's very black and white, but also it makes us want it more. If you say, don't think about pink elephants. Just don't think about it. Don't think about the pink elephants. What are you going to start to think about all the time and just focus on? You're going to think about pink elephants all the time. I use that example because someone used that example before, and now it's just always stuck with me. So I know it's super random, but just for the example. But I think that this is just one example of how we operate in America. I'll just say America because that's all I've ever experienced. But we think that there needs to be this rigidity or these boundaries. And I think it's due to the fact that we just like to know very clearly what I'm allowed to have and what I'm not allowed to have. And while I understand that, and while I once was someone who very much abided by and practiced that approach with little to no success, of course, I think we need to start getting comfortable finding some flexibility there and knowing that if we are really trying to achieve a changed lifestyle, it is going to require us to infuse our lifestyle with some flexibility. And when it comes to wanting some sort of label, I think back to what I was saying about carnivore diets and vegan diets and vegetarian and the like, I think that's another way for us as humans to have a box and have a clear understanding of these are the foods that fall within that category, and these are the things I'm allowed to have, and I can't have anything else. But think about how unsustainable that is. It's kind of like the ketogenic diet. I was talking with, once again, the Pilates instructor about this yesterday and how ketogenic diets, which for those of you who don't know, that is low carb, high fat. I think it's moderate protein. Maybe it's high protein. I think it's moderate protein. But it largely focuses on supporting the body to facilitate a ketogenic response, to induce ketosis, which is essentially burning fat as fuel. But having a carbohydrate is going to knock you out of that space. So this isn't the most sustainable approach, but I think people latch on to these trends and these approaches and think, well, this must be it. This must be the answer. And I think this can also come from a space of frustration where people feel like, well, I haven't tried that yet. I've tried everything else, but I haven't tried that yet. And it's funny because people come to me too, and they're like, I know everything already. You're not going to tell me anything I don't know. I just can't seem to make it work. And I understand, but I also will politely respond to that and say, I think that there probably is some things that I could teach you that you don't know. And we can utilize all of your background and knowledge to best support the journey. Giving them that assurance that it's great that they're coming in with foundation, but let's see if we can expand a little bit and grow a little bit with the knowledge that you do have and the new knowledge that I can offer you. So when it comes to these boxes, I think that while we're going into it with good intent, and I think it is the human inclination to want to have that structure, I also feel as though this is where we struggle because we do put ourselves in that box. And the second that we choose foods that are out of that box, we immediately go into diet mode and we immediately feel as though we've now failed or we've now been unsuccessful or why bother, right? I already had, this for breakfast, so I'm just going to eat whatever I want for the rest of the day. Or this weekend looked the way it looked and I'm just going to move on, or I'll try again next Monday, or, whatever the case might be. And I think a large part of this is because we are not allowing ourselves flexibility. We think there's a perfect way to do it, and I'm here to tell you that there's not. Now, this also is relevant to how different every single person is. I'm actually starting the section of my functional lab training that's focusing on that's focusing on lab training. No, that's focusing on food sensitivities. And it's fascinating because I actually got a food sensitivities test many years ago. And so I'm very curious. I'm going to end up performing the test on myself, taking the test myself, because I'm very curious to see what comes back, because I'm not totally sure about the reliability of the test that I took many years ago. I really didn't do much with the information. I just remember it was like sheep's milk was sensitive to, chickpeas I was sensitive to, pork, maybe? I don't remember. But I had a couple of random ones, and who knows? And I actually just got an email from them that said, we recommend retesting every 6 years. So I was like, holy cow, that was 6 years ago that I took that test. It's just wild, time flies. But I want to speak to the fact that we're all so unique, and the way I tolerate certain foods is going to be different than the way you tolerate certain foods. And not only that, not just in our own individual makeup, but if you have any kind of, say, blood sugar issue going on, hormonal health issue going on, gut issue going on, you might not be able to tolerate food as best as you could maybe 10 years ago or 5 years ago, or maybe how you'll be able to tolerate foods in 10 years. Our bodies are also ever changing. And so acknowledging that through the lens of your nutrition is important, because we get hooked on, well, this is what they say is healthy, or I should go gluten-free, or I should go dairy-free, or I'm going to continue to eat this food even though I have extreme symptoms after the fact, and it's really important that we're able to customize and individualize it to our own health and our own bodies, and understand that that's the perfect diet. I said the perfect diet doesn't exist, but the perfect diet for you is what works for you. The perfect diet for you is what your body agrees with, what fuels you. And starting to build awareness around your nutrition, eating foods, identifying how it makes you feel, that's one of the best ways that you can start to get to know yourself in this way. So what have we covered thus far? We've talked about how we as humans, or I guess we as Americans, like having parameters. We like having guidelines. We think that we need to rigidly stick to a plan or a program or a type of eating, because that's what's going to get us results faster. That's the cure. That's the key. That is the key. That is what's going to change it all for us. And I think you probably have had an experience before where you've tried that and you've realized that maybe it isn't, in fact, the key. So we've talked about that a little bit. We've talked about how these dietary trends tend to come up. I know more recently on social media, the carnivore diet has really changed a lot of people's lives, and it's been really helpful for them. But ultimately, I think that's the problem, is we get hooked on these labels that we are wanting so desperately to have, like, the name for it. I think that's what makes us feel secure. Oh, I'm following the carnivore diet, so that means I can have X, Y, and Z. It puts you in that box, as opposed to, yeah, I just eat animal-based diets. It's more of like a real food, whole foods-based diet. And that's what I do, which I would say that probably is how I align the most. I don't think I align with any particular, I'm a big believer in plant-based and choosing lots of color and getting enough fiber in and embracing that. But also I'm going to have red meat. I'm going to have fish. I'm going to have chicken. I'm going to have animal-based foods. I'm, currently only basically buying raw milk, and coconut milk. I love my coconut milk. But other than that, I don't have a particular label to my diet. And I feel that is the best space that I could be and that I have ever been when it comes to my nutrition. So what I would then encourage you with is, how does this resonate with you? How does this relate to the way that you approach nutrition? What have you tried in the past? Does it feel claustrophobic to feel as though you're limited to a certain way of eating? I think that it takes some almost introspection around what you're currently doing and how it feels for you, not only in the sense of how does it feel physically in my body to eat these foods. Do I feel good? Do I feel energized? Do I feel fueled? And also, does this feel sustainable for me? Does this feel like something that I could commit to and maintain for the long term? And I think just from those two questions alone, you will learn so much. And maybe it'll require you to do an experiment on yourself and do, say, 2 weeks or say 30 days of eating a particular way, or just tuning into how you're eating right now and noticing how you feel, noticing what the experience is like for you, and then determining, okay, does this work for me, or is there a better way? Really, that's what it really boils down to. Ultimately, what's going to be most sustainable for you is the one that you want to commit to. If you're eating something and you're miserable, or you're eating something and you don't feel good, why would you want to continue to do that? Even if in your mind and in your body, you're like, oh, well, this is healthy. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be eating. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. Then that's okay. And this brings me back to there is no such thing as the perfect diet. Because I might say over here, I love broccoli so much. Give me broccoli every day of the week. And you might be thinking, well, Emily likes broccoli, so I need to like broccoli. Yeah, I think it would be helpful to your mind and body health to like broccoli, but there's a number of ways to continue to get nutrients that are similar to that of the composition of broccoli in other foods, in other ways. And you can find that for yourself. It's just about taking the time to do that. And so when we talk about this perfect diet, or we expect there to be some one size fits all, it's so misleading, and it's also very problematic to our own relationships with food, to the way that we see nutrition, and can lead us down a path of overwhelm and disappointment and discouragement and all of the above. And I think at the end of the day, we need to just shatter this idea, okay? All in favor, say aye, because honestly, at this point, it's really messing with us. And I think the second that we're able to take a step back and really look at the impact that this has probably had on how you see food, how you see nutrition, how you operate on a day-to-day basis, the better off you'll be at starting to say, all right, well, this has not been working for me, or this does not feel good to me, or this is not sustainable for me. So what changes do I have to make? Where do I need to make adjustments? And how can I approach this differently? And that's the first step. Life throws at us so much, and eating and nutrition and food is a part of life, whether we want it to be or not. That is just how it goes. And so we have to be willing to remain flexible. And if we continue to think that there is a perfect diet, we are going to have much more trouble. And that's just the experience that I've had. This is the work that I've done with clients. And it just simply does not exist, because we're all so unique and we all have different needs. And the second we can start to be okay with that, and the second that we can start to adopt that mentality, I think the better off we'll be. The other concept that I think is important to touch on is the expectation that we'll be perfect. And I know that I kind of intermittently mixed this into the conversation earlier, but I think the expectation of perfectionism comes from a good place, but it's not possible. And it also separates this diet to lifestyle approach, I guess, is the way to put it. That if we are following a diet, say we have a 6-week diet program, there is the expectation that we should be perfect on it, right? Because it's 6 weeks of intentionality, following a certain diet plan, following a certain meal plan, following a certain program, and we need to stick to it because we're looking for a certain result. Whereas a lifestyle is more about shifting and evolving the habits that exist already to create better outcomes. Now, I'm thinking of one particular client. She came to me in the fall, was dealing with extreme sugar cravings, lots of addictive tendencies with sugar, pretty disordered meals, and, wasn't really nourishing properly, which was likely driving her sugar cravings, which, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, I touch a little bit more about hunger and cravings and so forth in that episode, but as an aside, but we spent a lot of time building her plate, exploring the basics, creating a plan, especially given her age, given her activity level, really focusing on that. And she came into session today. Now we're into March, and we've been meeting since December, or maybe October we've been meeting. She came to me and she was feeling discouraged, and she was feeling like she didn't have a perfect week, or she didn't have a good week. She was making poor choices here and there. And we went through her journals and we talked about how much growth has come just since the fall, just since October when we started working together. The amount of growth and transformation that has taken place is insane. It's insane. And I try to illuminate that as often as I can with each and every one of my clients, because I think a lot of times along the way we can have a hard time acknowledging that and recognizing how far we've come. So it takes a second to take a step back and do that, or have someone reflect it to you, which is my job in my work. But what I said to her was those moments that she had trouble, or we call them areas for growth, are moments that come with life. And what we can do is we can learn from them. How could I approach this differently? How could I support my body better in this moment? What was this driven by? Was there some emotional eating here? What was causing this? How can we learn from it? The goal is never to be perfect. That is never the goal. The goal is to look at the experiences we're having and figure out how we can troubleshoot them so that we can be more effective and move forward more productively in comparison to what keeps causing us to make said choices. For example, she said to me that she was at a Irish festival this past weekend. She's actually from my area, so I'm familiar with the festival that she was at. And she said she had 3 pieces of pizza and 3 beers. And I asked her, okay, how could we have been more productive here? How could we have been more effective? How could we have, supported the body a little bit better? Or what, could we have had beforehand? Or how could we have balanced it? Just as a means of, triggering that kind of thought process so that the next time maybe some of that will go off for her organically. How can we be a little bit more productive here? Really, that's all I'm curious to know. And then acknowledging that you are out celebrating, you are, at an event that's not happening every day, every week, every month, every year. And it would be more stressful to put yourself in that position and not have anything to eat at all, or be stressing the whole time about, wanting the pizza but not letting yourself have the pizza, as opposed to just having the pizza, being present with it, having the beer, we'll say that too, being present with it, and then moving on. And a big area for growth here, we would call this a micro win, is she wasn't feeling guilt or shame around her making her choices, first and foremost. And she grew a lot in that aspect, because in the past she would feel guilt and shame around them, and then she'd go reach for something else, because in order to medicate the shame, the guilt, because she felt poorly, she would choose something sweet or something less healthful to feel better, and then it would perpetuate the cycle. So just that alone was an area that we talked about so that I could illuminate the wins that were happening here, and also just gave her the opportunity to say, yeah, if you were to have 3 slices of pizza every single day, then I would say, let's talk about how we can be a little bit more productive, how we can balance it, how we can reduce it, whatever the case is. But to have that and enjoy it and be present with it and not feel guilt or regret afterwards, and then also not letting that didn't trigger further binge or further emotional eating or whatever the case is, I would say that's a big win, because then she woke up Monday morning and she had her usual breakfast, her high protein breakfast, and she went through the day and she was fine and she survived, right? And that is a win to me. That is success to me, is knowing that the nutritional choices that you make are all worthy of being a part of life, because honestly, life is short, and why would we not? Why would we restrict ourselves from the foods that we enjoy? But then also acknowledging that there are a lot of foods that we should be prioritizing the majority of the time. And those are the ones that are going to bring nourishment to the body. Those are the ones that are going to be fueling for the body. And that's really what we want to focus on. That's what we want to focus on. The few slices of pizza that you have every couple months, that is not going to impact you. If we're looking at this through a lifestyle and we're looking at this as a spectrum, that will not impact you, versus looking at it as a diet, that I had 3 pieces of pizza and this falls off my diet plan, so now I've ruined it. There is an entirely different energy within both of those approaches. That diet versus lifestyle mentality. When, for example, my client, that's just a recent example, having those pieces of pizza, having those beers, coming home, not reaching for something that's lesser healthful or letting that result in a furthering of choosing, sugar and sweets and kind of losing her wits about her around her choices, and then instead waking up the next morning and continuing on as normal, continuing on as usual. And that's huge. That is so much growth for this particular individual, without a doubt. And just being able to rebound in that way and have the awareness around nutrition and being able to choose the foods that are nourishing, I think that liberates you in so many ways. It liberates you in the sense of, I know all foods are welcome at the table, and I also know that there's no one size fits all, that every day is going to look differently, that different seasons of my life are going to change, and I'm going to feel different ways and want different foods, and that's okay. And I can sit comfortably in this space because I know that majority of the time I'm choosing foods that are nourishing, I'm choosing foods that are whole, and this doesn't require me to put a label on it. It doesn't require me to eat perfectly and only choose those foods all the time and put myself in this box and limit myself and feel like I have some restriction. Instead, I can relinquish all of that and choose the foods that are most nourishing for me. And I think that comes with a lot of patience, and it comes with a lot of awareness. It comes with some education too. I mean, I say this all the time, and that's where a big inspiration for the functionally fueled calls that I'm offering all month comes from, is that education component. Because I could tell you all day long, eat this, eat that, but until you really understand why, you're not gonna grasp it as best as you would if you said, yeah, I'm choosing this food for this reason. I am, building my plate in this way for this reason. And that gives you so much more of an incentive, so much more of a motivation to make those choices over and over again, as opposed to, oh, well, Emily told me I should eat this, so I'm going to do it, but I don't really know why. I don't really know why I'm doing it. So the education piece, the understanding, and even further, just the general reduction in stress and pressure that we place on ourselves to eat a certain way, to uphold these perfect diet expectations, to follow some rigid structure. All of that kind of just falls away when you start to really cultivate a healthy lifestyle where you're choosing real whole foods and you have more freedom around what that looks like for you, as opposed to, these are the meals I'm allowed to have, these are the foods I'm allowed to have. There's so much stress and pressure, and sometimes you don't even realize how much there actually is. And I think that can feel really relieving when we slowly start to step away from what diet culture tells us is healthy, or the expectations that we set for ourselves, and we start to adopt a completely transformed approach to nutrition, which feels better. It feels better. It feels better when you're choosing foods that fuel you, that nourish you, that give you energy, that align with you, that you enjoy, that you prefer, versus choosing foods that you think you should be eating, that don't help you feel good, or that diet culture says we should be eating, but you don't enjoy, or that drain you, that irritate you, that cause symptoms for you. I mean, we don't have enough of this awareness, and that's really where perfect nutrition comes from. I know that this episode was kind of a roundabout slew of tangents of me just talking about the perfect diet and how that doesn't really exist. And I encourage you to really reflect on it. The perfect diet for you is the one that works for you, that's sustainable for you, that includes foods that you enjoy, that includes foods that agree with you, that are based on your body and based on your health goals, and based on even, you could go as far as to say your ethnic background, or the area that you live in the world, or what season it is. If you're a male or you're a female, if you're pregnant or not pregnant, if you're postpartum or prenatal, like whatever, right? There's so many different factors that influence who you are and what your body needs. So the second that we're able to step back from the expectation that one, we will ever be perfect in our nutrition, that even exists, and or there's a perfect diet, and that is something that is possible for anyone to achieve, it's just simply not the case. It's simply not the case. And if we can start to challenge this idea as it relates to our own specific relationship with food and nutrition, and we start to look at things a little bit differently, I think it could be life-changing. And I'm speaking from experience because that is where I am today. I feel so good in the way I fuel and the choices I make and what I prioritize on a day-to-day basis, or say over the course of, my week. And I feel very lucky that I got to this space because it just feels free. That sounds so dramatic, but it does. It feels free. I don't feel like I have rigidity. I don't feel like I don't want to eat this food. Like I don't feel like I can't have certain food that I want to have. That's also important. And this has taken time for me. This has taken a lot of time for me, but I'm so grateful to have gotten to where I am, and now I can teach others to do the same. So I hope that this is helpful. As always, when talking about nutrition and food, I want to put out there how important it is to be aware of disordered eating and the potential for eating disorders. If you're feeling like you do need support, you do need help from a physician or a mental health professional, I always encourage you to do that. This is definitely a sensitive topic to talk about. It could be triggering for a lot of people, so I want to be sure that I mention that. And my information is in the show notes if you need support in finding some help, because I'm happy to help you with that. And if you'd like to work together, that's always an option as well. Details are in the show notes. I've linked the link to schedule your Functionally Fueled call if you're interested in a 90-minute mind, body, nutrition mastery call. I love it. I love doing this kind of work, so please feel free. And then also there is information regarding general holistic health coaching and functional nutrition that we can discuss as well. So thank you for being here. I hope that this was valuable. I hope that this was helpful. And I look forward to seeing you next time at the table. And in the meantime, be well.